Good evening. Well, people enjoying the beautiful weather. Yeah. GK, what's it like in Baja? You make us all jealous?
85 and sunny. It's beautiful.
Wow. Amazing. Today it probably got up to like 65-ish, people say, around there. Yeah. Yep, we're working our way there. Apparently, I heard it's the driest April in like 70 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. So it's kind of fun on the getting warmth side, but a little bit scary on the no water side. But, yeah. And the moon. Just seeing the moon. Yeah. Well, on that note, actually, we had the ceremony Fusatsu last night that I spoke at length about last class, and I think two people from this room besides Joichi and I went, and it was Aaron's first time going, and Rose is an avid attendee, and I asked them if they would share a few words about their experience and what they have to share and offer. So Aaron, do you want to start?
Sure.
Joy, do you want to turn the camera so we can see? Was that easy to do?
You had kind of given us that sheet that sort of outlines the words that were being said, and I had arrived early and talked to Kogan and Dokyu, and they had given me the sort of heads up to be like, oh, there's the sort of the coal and the fire and the. Despite all of this, I missed so many of these. Like I walked in without doing that and didn't know when to do it, but and sat in the front and couldn't follow other people. But in the end, it was fine. It was lovely. And I hadn't done a walking meditation before, and really, I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of it.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I think connecting it. It's sort of this class is reinforcing. Like it'd be interesting to have gone to that without taking this class to like connect what the Fusatsu ceremony is trying to do in terms of reinforcing the intention of the precepts each month. So it's kind of lovely to have the background and thinking about coming back and what that means, not just the first time, but what do sort of other visits mean. Yeah. I see it, yeah.
Could you comment at all about the space that was being held together, or anything that was surprising or noteworthy for you? The ritual and, I don't know, the theatrics of it all, you might say?
I think it was hard because all I saw was Joichi. And I was trying to think it was Anya next to me that was like out of the corner of my eye, being like, what is happening in this space? So I think if I would have sat maybe in a different space to be able to see that. And I haven't been on Sundays in a year, and so it was kind of a lovely just coming back into the space of ritual, and it was a good reminder of why this space exists. I'll let Rose expand.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So I guess the first thing to say is I'm not much on words on stuff, and so talking about things like ritual, and I don't go to the verbal and the ideas part. In my practice, I'm very much drawn to ritual and form. And so what's interesting for me is this whole year in COVID, I said I can't go to Fusatsu, even though it's one of the things that draws me the most. I've been really kind of reclusive because of the pandemic, and now with people getting vaccinated, it felt like I could start coming around more people. And so I really have missed it. And the notion of having Zoom on during Fusatsu was a real clash for me. So that was hard. And then when I found out when you said that there was a conflict on Monday, no Zoom, I was like, oh!
It's your chance.
But for me, I get really drawn to the physicality of practice. And so the aspect of all the, what I mean by that is there's something that happens for me with the chanting and the bowing and the physicality of the form, and as much as I feel often afraid to be part of Sangha, the sense of doing this practice around renewal of vow with other people feels really important to me. It's like, as much as I don't want to talk about stuff and ideas, the feeling that Sangha is together doing this thing just feels very important to me. So I don't know what else to say other than that, but after Fusatsu I feel really different. Like after, that's, and especially this with the big moon and having been in the pandemic and having had family crises and being able to come and be with Sangha and have the form and the ceremony was especially poignant. So I was really happy to do it and have it. And thank you all very much.
Rose, is there a particular part that, if I said, not that you like it the best, but something that really calls to you when it happens, you're like, oh yeah.
Well, there's this magical thing. It's the part that I find most powerful is the personal atonement piece, which isn't taking place right now, but there's a vulnerability in it, there's a bearing of self and just the bearing of something. So that is something that feels like there's a best thing, like that's part of the best thing. But even without that enactment, the sense of that was held, I felt like in the ceremony. But I love the magic wand, the pine wand, that everybody gets the magicness of that moment. I don't know to explain that more, but there's some in that act. But for me, it's hard to say what's favorite or what's most powerful, but the sense of being in posture, the physicality of that, and then the changing to doing the prostrations. There's no favorite because the bowing down feels something and then the coming back up feels something to me. So I didn't answer your question of what is most favorite.
That was perfect.
That's a lot.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you both for sharing. Sometimes, I don't know, I can feel like I get up here and I'm wearing the robes. Obviously, I love the form. That's something I've really signed up to bathe my heart, soul, body, mind in. Edjo sometimes says affectionately and somewhat intensely that we have to break our body for this practice. And he doesn't mean like become decrepit, but we have to change how we move. We have to sign up how to move differently as a monk. So it's cool to hear other people seem to like this stuff too. Not just me. So maybe, does anyone want to make any further comments on the commentary that maybe some people spent some time reading this past week on the precepts, the poetic sort of extension of the precepts by the founder of Soto Zen, Dogen Zenji. Just want to offer space for that if anyone's been working with that or have a question about it or something poignant they want to offer. And you can feel free to take up some space. We mostly just have time for discussion tonight. So.
Genjo, do we have a handout for Kevin?
We do not right now. Sorry, Kevin. I can get you one after class though.
Thank you.
You sure? Anyone want to jump in? We can move on. Oh, Aaron.
Hi.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, we'll go Aaron and then Jacob.
I'm just going to add that the piece that struck me that I think I'll take with me is the idea that it's better to make an intention and to fail than to not have made the intention. And so I think to take the precepts and not to sort of follow them but keep trying, as opposed to not have taken the precepts. I feel like that was a line I took from, which I mean goes back to goal setting or you name it, but sort of like putting that aim out and reinforcing it, and having the Fusatsu ceremony sort of also reinforcing that. It sort of seems to put it forefront of mind is more likely for it to happen than to sort of get caught up to be like, I don't know if I can do like number 2 through 5. So yeah, I think that was just a nice reminder.
It's so warm in that way. Like just saying, like just put it on and just have these. And of course, you're gonna make a giant mess of it all. But if you decide to take up the practice of keeping it forefront in your heart and returning to it again and again and again, and then atonement every month. But then like, how do you become good at that choreography in your moment-to-moment life? Like when you like drop the ball, if you become skillful at knowing how to orient yourself to reconnect with your deep intention rather than, I don't know, spending a day or a week or years like running from something. Yeah. Jacob and then Holly.
I can't, well, okay, I can read it real quick. I'm just gonna need to turn off my camera. But reading the twin commentaries on specifically the like not dealing in intoxicants. I just kind of there was a lot of aliveness in the two kind of readings on it, because one felt very direct and the other felt like it was inviting you to question and for there to be room, but then it just kind of led me back to my initial assessment of the initial one, which was, seeing it as very direct. I can read them real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Not dealing in intoxicants. Do not bring intoxicants in. Do not let them come in. This is truly the greatest brightness. And in the originally pure Dharma, not giving birth to ignorance is the precept of not dealing in intoxicants.
Yeah, they definitely have a different flavors going on.
Yeah. And I definitely feel drawn to the idea of it being, I feel drawn to the idea of like ignorance and not giving rise to ignorance being kind of linked to not dealing in intoxicants. There's a facet there that's like, I feel like in my own worldview, I see intoxicants as being very physical, grounded things, drugs, alcohol, etc. But I think that adds another layer to it where it's both things that produce ignorance and also just the embodiment of ignorant thought and sort of, following that out. I think there's a lot to be found there.
It definitely adds so many layers of richness rather than just being like, well, if I just avoid these activities, like I've checked the boxes, I'm in the clear. But it's like, oh, how do I notice if I'm like putting active thought energy to something that I think is pretty pointless or not fulfilling deeper, heartfelt desires of my life. Being like, oh, there it is. It's there too. It's all over the place. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Now, Holly, you still want to share something? Okay. Backing out of the queue. There's a spot open. Yeah, Matthew. And then Jikie.
This is a little bit more personal, but one of the ones that has been stirring with me is the not misusing sexuality, because I went through a divorce 2 years ago, and so it made me look a lot at how I try to pursue relationships with just people in general to fill my intimacy needs, just from like an interpersonal aspect. And then the fact that it speaks specifically here that there's no place for desires. And it makes me wonder how that relates to my want to be close to people and have people close to me. And I don't know, not sure where I sit on that right now, but it's been a point of reflection for me. I don't know.
Yeah, that really it calls you into that question, being like, what do you mean? There's nothing. They're clearly here,
Right? Like,
they're flowing through, but what is he trying to point to there?
yeah. So I don't know. Do you have any insight on what that means?
When you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds problematic when you first said it, but
because like there's no place for desire. All Buddhas are on the same path, and so like, yeah, like we don't want to be grasping at each other, but part of being human and being a self is having, a rising with each other. And so like, without that interdependency, like what's wholesome there? I don't know.
I think one way of that no place of desires, if I think about it more, I think that might be pointing to there's no object that can be got after. There's no externally existing object for my desire to land on. And maybe pointing it back to the fact that we're looking for that object all the time and thinking that it can be obtained, that it can be cut out from another person, like in me, I could get rid of it. That there's all Buddhas are on the same path. It's not just living beings, but if I take someone in their wholeness, I think it maybe the way it's coming to me is not that I can't desire to be intimate with people, even sexually, but that constantly be reflecting and folding that through the totality of another human being, the totality of myself and my own needs. And I think our really, pure low chakra energies tend to transform when we wash ourselves with that kind of fullness. Now you're gonna jump in, Holly?
Well, yeah, I just thought that, like, if you think about being around two people who have like recently had sex, sometimes they're like filled with like joy, and it can like spread to a whole room, and so I feel like it's the sort of the balance of like, if like two people coming together like creates more joy for the world, then it's not necessarily like the craving and the desire, but it's like creating like beauty as well. Like, so, but it depends on like the intention behind it. And I don't know.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
For sure, that's beautiful. One thing, I think I might talk a little bit more about this next class, but the kind of little line I had was something like what it means to have the courage to desire with all of ourself, like to really desire fully. I don't know, I find myself, I guess if I lean towards being Buddhist, a kind of part of me is like, ooh, desire, get rid of it, cut it off, like wash myself clean of that, because that's a problem, rather than the idea that it's a very small aperture of my heart, perhaps, like just one small layer of it, and to really allow the fullness of my desires to enter my life and not be just trying to cut things off. I think that can be a profoundly guiding ethical compass. But I think mostly we can be concerned with sort of maybe kind of a closed-fisted, kind of a tight or shut down posture versus like what's really all here, and if I start becoming sensitive to all the layers of myself, how do I start to unfold harmony and not just kick out the parts that seem to be problematic and grasp onto the parts that seem to be good. But realize that those are all layers of the same energies and how to become skillful with them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was it Chikie? I'm gonna get in there.
Yeah, this wasn't what I was in the queue to say, but I think I've also thought a lot about not misusing sexuality and kind of following that down into interactions that maybe we wouldn't usually think of as sexual, but in a culture that is broadly sexualized. And I think that's, getting down into the meat of it where there's no easy answer. But one thing I think about is that all of these precepts that have to do with how we interact with other people have a lot to do with how do we interact in a way that is not manipulative in any way and that is liberating for all beings. And so if we think about all of those interactions in that light, that's helpful.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say was just how much I appreciate hearing other people's insights into especially the commentary on the precepts, but just other people's experiences with the precepts. And I was thinking so much of the poetic commentary, there's ones that resonate with you and you're like, oh yeah, I have an idea about that, and others that are just kind of like, okay. And just last week, somebody said something about the one on anger, and it was just kind of hearing someone else say, neither withdrawn or set forth, that just something just clicked, and I thought about it in a different way, and I just really appreciate everybody's participation in that.
Well, maybe we'll wrap up this portion of the discussion and move into another portion of discussion. My thought was just real quick, I was thinking we're in class 5 of 6, so we have one more class after this. Maybe a quick plug right there. It's been decided that I will be teaching another class on the paramitas. So this ethics class, we've been talking about one of the paramitas, which there are 7 of them, and this is the formulation of path that's most often used in the Mahayana schools. So the sort of great Mahayana means great vehicle, and Zen is a part of that kind of flow, particular flavor of Buddhism that came out of India. So anywho, those 7 are generosity, ethics, patience, vigor, wisdom, and concentration. So I think people will be asked to sign up for that again, and there's a number of weeks to do that, so no rush, but if you're interested, that's happening. And so, where was I going with that? Yeah, we're in class 5 of 6, and so I thought I'd kind of recap the few points that I think I've made so far and open sort of more nitty-gritty conversation about the precepts and sort of guide that discussion a little bit. Yeah. So actually, it was kind of, I was like, there must be so much I've talked about, and it doesn't really seem like that upon further reflection. So one of them is that ethical consideration is really a primary facet of human life. I think before teaching this class, I had to be like, ethics, like how do I frame that really within wisdom, or some deep metaphysical truth. But as I presented in the first class, I don't know if you remember, I talked about this philosopher, Levinas, French philosopher in the 19th century. He said that our subjectivity is really defined by others, by our relationships. And I really think that's very Buddhist right off the get-go, and is very clear that I can't really know who I am without others. And so within all of my interaction, always this question of how do I meet others? And he said, really, how do you meet the face of another person? He said that that's just like a primary springing forth of philosophy of all facets of life. So next, that morality or virtue is totally wrapped up in concentration and wisdom. Not that any of these is really separate fundamentally or more important or primary. In Buddhism, those are the three baskets of the teaching that was kind of in antiquity and still today. This sila, samadhi, and prajna. So virtue, concentration, and wisdom. And that they're all, I think, a really beautiful image there. If you're trying to talk about one, the other two are just hidden, like supporting it from behind. So I think this might be something I talk more about next class, is when we really think about ethics, that if we want to sort of fully enact ethical living, that wisdom and concentration really have to be behind that for it to sort of flow and have life. So next, that the ethical codes or precept of this school are less about hard rules. I give a short kind of historical narrative about how that flowed through time and space and cultures in Buddhism. But rather they point to a kind of spirit, a kind of fountainhead of ethical posturing in the world. And that they point to cultivating deeper and more sensitive understandings. So particularly through those three pure precepts, the first one being stop. Don't do these things. You just need to holster. If you feel like you're going to do it, just stop. You don't really need to know why or have any deeper thinking beyond that. And the next one, when you can manage it, to go further and cultivate the positive aspects of that stopping. As Jikie so beautifully said right there, that we actually are giving a gift when we say don't overtly sexualize another being. We give the gift of safety, of personhood, of a kind of respect and expansiveness to another person. And actually, I think this homework tonight, there's a very beautiful little sutra about that. It says when you stop doing this thing, actually this is what you're giving living beings. It's with the first 5 precepts. So you'll be able to look at that. And lastly, what I spoke about last class at length was learning how to atone is a really important part of cultivating peace of mind and ethical life, that if we don't know how to have some, to dance with the various transgressions of our heart, and I would like to say kind of living and moving through a narrow aperture that sort of we realize it kind of lops off the needs and things we wish to give other living beings. How do we recognize that? And how do we sort of prime the pump to be connected to that and to move forward and transform that into real learning? And there are all sorts of ways we go off with that. I don't know about you guys, but just when you notice the small kind of like voice of justification in your head, like learning that that's a red flag, no matter kind of how small, there are all these ways that we can come into greater faculty with streamlining how to live cleanly and ethically. And this atonement is a real part of that. And our school has a particular form for that. And really, I think that also informs us in a more subtle, moment-to-moment way. So that's what I hoped to have offered these past 4 classes. And I want to spend really the rest of the class, and we can change subjects if we want, but to talk about this embracing living beings. Embracing living beings. As I read through everyone's wonderful offerings of talking about sort of ethical conundrums and perspectives that they're working with, I found that it actually wasn't really the main central point for all of them, but many of them came back to this again and again, is even if I've been hurt really terribly by someone, what does it mean to embrace living beings? In terms of cultivating healthy boundaries, how do I embrace living beings? When there are parts of myself that keep doing something that I don't like and I see as harmful to other people, how do I embrace living beings there? So I think that it's just a really beautiful offering to think about embracing living beings. It's very sweet kind of on the forefront, but when we get down into the weeds of it, it can get quite challenging. Another one is, how do we fight for justice? So, and that word there kind of used fight deliberately. That sometimes we can, I think, have a poverty of imagination in thinking that if we're going to be good Buddhists, it means to just be peaceful and quiet all the time, but there might be really an appropriate time that embracing living beings means being loud and being problematic for other beings in order to bring about equality in our world. So I think there's all kinds of richness there that many people have insight to, and I sort of want to open up the floor. And when you might see people in the hall, just Joichi moved the screen a little bit, and I think he's actually going to stop just keeping the camera on me and sort of be panning it around a bit more, sort of like he was doing before. And as we talk, I think people are sort of in the queue of this, but he's moving around the mic, right? His little laser gun is what it looks like. So you can sort of get his eye, and if you're going to speak, make sure that's on you. And then we've already started doing this, which is wonderful, but feel free to ping off each other, sort of grab something and be like, yeah, that's great. Or, I don't know, you could argue with people, probably depending on how well you know them. But yeah, so you can have a little bit. Is that Jacob?
Yeah. I think I wanted to jump in and just kind of maybe start by offering some internal reflection on the idea of embracing living beings, because there's so many wonderful facets to that idea and to that practice that, at least for me personally, I've been encountering a lot more lately. I'm in another practice discussion along with this one on doing some anti-racism work, and we've been reading this book by Rhonda McGee, and there's a lot of exercises and activities to be done like throughout the course of reading that book in relation to what you're reading, and it's just kind of I've been spending these past 5 weeks very reflective and very deepening my own awareness and deepening my ability to just hit pause and just kind of stop and just see when I'm getting angry, or this is upsetting me, this is hurting me, I'm hurting myself, my actions right now are actively hurting others, and just becoming way more mindful of seeing a lot of that. And I think one of the big pieces of embracing living beings is also being able to embrace yourself in your moments of fragility and weakness and fault. And part of that is, come to find, is seeing it, owning it, admitting it, but also questioning it, and also letting it just work with you, and not trying to, I've been really present with this idea of, not crushing it, because this has come up a lot I think in this group, and also just throughout my own practice of, don't grab it, don't crush it, don't push it down. And I think for me, in my own practice, I found there's a lot of different ways that something can be crushed. It can be pushed away and rejected, but it can also kind of be you can overanalyze it and really try to just, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to dig into it. And I don't know, I've just found this really fascinating space of making room for it, but also not putting it under a microscope, and just letting my life continue, but also being aware and holding that. It's almost I guess the way I could do it is feeling like a parent carrying a child, and you have to go around. You still have to in the house. You still have all these things you need to do. It's not always easy to just completely sit and pause and give it your full attention. And so you might carry it with you while you do other tasks. Being attentive to it, but also, being in, being engaged with whatever the work is you need to do in addition to it. And I don't know, that is, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, go ahead, James.
have two bits. First, GK, I envy you. I found the commentary on the ninth precept, sort of not being angry, completely impenetrable. I have sat and stared at it and read through it, and it's like, I must be missing something here. Usually with the others, there's either a piece from, is it Dogen and then Bodhidharma, or?
Correct.
Okay. Usually either there's one or another that catches, and I'm like, okay, I can see where this is going, but with anger, no, nothing. It's like, you're so off to just sit with that. But I am glad to know that I'm not the only person who was a little hung there. Second, something you said a moment ago about justification and that in feeling that internal process, feeling that I am justifying my action, that process of justifying the action that you are taking as being a red flag. Can you expand on that? Because that dovetails with a discussion I was having very recently regarding the justification of actions that on their own merit would be considered immoral, but based upon a context of saying, oh, well, these people are just bad, therefore it's okay. Which rubbed me the wrong way and it turned into a fairly heated discussion. But if you could expand on that, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Sure. For me, I'll notice it'll, I won't realize that I'm, be the right word. I really just want what I want, and I'm looking for a way for that to feel okay in all these various ways. Like, for example, let's say I'm trying to be more conscious about how I don't know, use air travel, for example, because I'm worried about how that's impacting the planet. And so kind of being like, well, this is, the plane's probably just going to fly anyway, even if I'm not on it. It's really not going to be a big difference. And so, for me at least, I'm not quite, what do I say? If I'm really taking that to the place of sensitivity, is I'm trying to shut down a small wound I have of the pain of that situation. So rather than, for me, I'm realizing I'm not just looking for it to be okay, but I'm really just trying to make the tether of my conscience go away, so I don't have to keep paying attention to it. Or like Jacob just said, really beautiful way, kind of carrying around a baby. And so, or like I was in the shower the other day and I forgot to bring my soap in the shower, and I was like, well, my roommate's showered, or he like has this little, he has a little soap dispenser thing, and I was like, well, he wouldn't mind. In fact, he'd even want me to have it. There's this way in which I was just like, I'm too lazy to just kind of like pat myself off dry and get my own soap. These weird ways in which I'm constantly like cutting off the corners of what I think is really right, just so I can like satisfy some easier way in the moment. And so learning to just kind of hear that voice and be like, oh, is there like a broader perspective? Is there, what else is going on in that mix of my being? And there's a term, I think I'll talk about this next class as well. The Buddha says something, Ananda asks the Buddha, what are the fruits of a virtuous life? And the Buddha responds something like, the joy of blamelessness. It's just a really beautiful term. And I think a joy that we often aren't thinking about, what that's really like. Instead, a part of me is like, okay, what's the most convenient? And I'm just like living my life through that lens with the world, rather than the reality that I'm sort of, in sort of a psychic, heart, full being way, pressed up against everyone. And being true to that, even if it makes me, take 25 more seconds to go get my own soap. That it's this weird way in which I've narrowed my sense of being out of convenience, rather than being true to something else that's more lively and invigorating. So basically, anytime just hearing like a little any sort of justification for anything. Not that it won't have some merit and it might actually help me do something or not and be helpful, but how is it trying to shut down the ethical inquiry? Yeah. Were you going to say something, GK?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I was thinking, sometimes my justifications of things are really eloquent and easy to believe, or sometimes society is really telling you, no, this is fine. And then I really think about it as following that there's a little yucky feeling, and that little yucky feeling in my gut. It's like, yeah, and this doesn't feel right, and learning to be more and more sensitive to that, and even if it doesn't seem 100% logical, or if the world is telling me that something is really good and fine, if it makes me feel inside, then learning to rely on that, and even if that means figuring it out later, but just stopping right there.
An example really in that direction of what GK just offered, I have a practice of, if I find a dead animal or a dead bug or something, that I'll take it and I'll put it on dirt. And I know Ejo has a practice of, he doesn't throw seeds in the garbage. He'll collect them and hold them and then put them on the earth somewhere. And there's a way in which how could that be ethical at all? But actually I just notice how the world has told me that a fly's life doesn't matter, or that certain lives don't matter. But I guess maybe in cultivating a positive side of the precepts, I want to cherish life. And to be stopped by the sight of a dead fly and be like, oh, it died. That holds a piece of my heart there, and I want to cultivate that. So today I really quickly, I dumped it, where was it? I threw it in a garbage can, and it wasn't too hard to retrieve, and I was like, oh, you just sort of cut off that little offering, that pouring forward that you like to take care of. And so I just sort of scooped it out, and a chance to go outside, set it on the dirt. And for me, yeah, a practice of opening and staying connected, even if the world thinks it's totally nuts, that there are places that are ripe with growth and opportunity. Does that get at your question, James? Well, does anyone have offerings in that kind of idea? What it means to follow kind of a thread of investigation, even when it just feels like it has no place in the world, or the world isn't giving those ideas or those heartstrings much credit. Wendy?
One thing that just really struck me when you were talking was that if it's convenient, because that really strikes with me. Sometimes I'll be doing something and you're busy, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be late, or we're going to be, and I can hear that little voice okay, just that, yes, it's convenient. And I think so much of our culture is based on convenience. It's so deep within us, rooted, that things are supposed to be convenient, and that to step back and especially when it's something small, and do things because I even hesitate to say that they're right, but it's yes, there's this knowing that there's another choice, right? It's going, this might feel very inconsequential. It doesn't need to make a big deal out of it. It doesn't. But let's just make another choice that is not about here's the easy way, or they can I remember I was doing some a lot of inner work with the energetic healer, and it was one of the lines of coming up with, it's not easy, but doing things with ease. So doing things with ease, grace, and gentleness. So it's not looking for an easy way, but it's looking to do it with ease. So you're not in this space of a lot of struggle, and again with kind of small things, it's just going into that space of, because there's a flow of being with ease, grace, and gentleness that is not convenience or easy.
Yeah. I asked Ejo, we talk about this often at the temple. Sometimes things can get busy here, and I sometimes be like, why can't we take a break? Why can't we just like, and he said he encourages us to live thickly, is the way he puts it. Like, have a very full life and lots to do and take care of. And he says, until you really do that for a good amount of time, you won't realize that you can actually just do one thing. And you can cultivate your ease while doing that one thing. Like, I'm just petting the cat. I'm just taking out this. I'm just doing that. You can have ease while you're moving in the world and not be bifurcated as our culture sort of hopes for you to be, do your work and then have entertainment and do the fun stuff later, right? We've taken such a coarse view of what like joy in a human life can be and what pleasure can be. But actually we can do our work, maybe some kinds of work you can't, because they're amoral to begin with, let's say. But many kinds of work you can do with a whole heart. But I think our culture is not encouraging us to do that. It doesn't make a lot of money. Yeah, anyone else on this topic? I'm sure this resonates for a lot of people. Well, actually, there's sort of an activity I wanted to do, and this feels like the right time for it. It feels like the energy is there. I'd like everyone to offer just a small phrase that for you helps unstick something that's stuck for you in relating with others and, I don't know, striving to do your best. Whatever that looks like for you and the language you use for it. And my idea for the activity was that we'd all be silent here together. And then we'd start with everyone in the hall and we'd popcorn. We use this term popcorn, where you sort of start speaking into the silence and go one by one. And you popcorn and you just read that phrase or statement. And just however it hits you in your belly, and really not more than a sentence. And we can just make that offering to each other. So for example, I wrote down a few for me. I endlessly goof up. And another one, human suffering and joy is immense. Another one, human beings are tough. I can be honest. So I offer those as instances. Those are, when I say those things, I really believe them, and they give me some courage or loosen me up or lighten me up to follow that line of my heart that isn't so easy to take. That there's all these little justifications that are saying, oh, but do this, move to the side, it's not convenient, it's really weird that you do that with the flies, whatever it is for your own heart. So, does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about that? The idea of that activity? So my idea is that we'll start with people in the hall. And if you don't want to share, you don't have to, but I encourage everyone to. And then once we're finished in the hall, then we'll move to people online. And maybe folks online, you could raise your hand first and kind of show that you're going a little bit. It might be easier for technology. So maybe...
Genjo, can you say again? So this is like an internal script that we might run over and over, that is, say the intention of it again?
Yeah, the intention is just, I would say, something you think is true. And it doesn't have to be something you necessarily are saying to yourself now and again. It could be something that just strikes you in the gut right now as true and helps opened you to living your truth as you best see it? Because I think, I imagine we're all doing much of this all the time, even people who are not engaged in spiritual practice, that there's a way you're teaching yourself, you're in therapy with yourself, you're trying to take care of yourself, and there are things we know we need to do, which are not our automatic default things, and just to make a creative, brief expression of that. So it's both it's for yourself and then to offer it to others here. Did that one land? Better?
Okay. I trust my inner knowing.
Oh, you're gonna start. I want to give us a few moments. You can hold on to that one. That one's great. That was another great example. In case you didn't hear it online, Wendy trusts her inner knowing. But thank you. We'll pause for maybe just a couple minutes so people can gather ourselves. And you could choose another one if you like. You could have two. So feel free to center yourself, and you can write it down if you wish, or just hold it in your head and your heart. And let's say, Wendy, after a minute or two, when you have one, you can start, okay?
Oh.
And actually, sorry to interrupt, people in the hall, raise your hand before you want to speak, and Joichi will put the mic on you, so we can be inclusive of all night folks. You ready, Wendy?
So the other thing that came in for me was I'm willing to change.
It's okay to not know, but you should stay with it. We'll need to move a little bit faster if we're going to make it out of here on time. Rose.
Slowing down, I hear and listen to other beings.
Everyone always does what they think is right.
Vulnerability is empowering.
Tight strings are to be loosened, loose strings tightened. Dance freely.
Knowing arises from not knowing.
Anyone else in the hall? I think we'll switch to folks online.
Our suffering springs from the same root.
Chikie, could you say that again? It chopped up a little bit for us.
Our suffering springs from the same.
Same roots.
Respond to fear with curiosity.
That's in the past.
Dave, could you say it again?
That's in the past. And then I also think that's in the future.
It can get better.
Allow others the joy of helping you.
Believe that everyone is trying to do their best.
Without effort, a sunflower turns to the sun.
Could you say that one more time, James?
Oh, sure, maybe. Without effort, a sunflower turns to the sun.
Thank you, everyone. I think on that note, we'll close class.